If you're just using tap water in your espresso machine, you might be getting much worse coffee than you could. Espresso is 98% water, so even though you're using expensive coffee beans, let's not ruin that by ignoring the water. In this video, I'll explain my taste tests and experiments with tap water, filtered water, bottled water, and finally with pro barista solutions to see which are the best ways to make your espresso delicious. At the end, I'll explain which I think are the best choices for water depending on how much effort you're willing to put in. That's what we're talking about here on episode 3 of Better Espresso. Before we jump in, if you're new here, hi, I'm Charlie, and I make videos to help you get the most out of your espresso gear at home. If you get to the end of this video and you found it useful or interesting, I would love it if you would hit the like button and appease the YouTube algorithm gods, and let me know in the comments what you would like a deep dive on in the next episode of Better Espresso. Okay, on with the video. You might think that playing mad scientist with the water you use for coffee and altering the mineral composition is way too much effort to put into your morning brew. But it's super important, and that's why your local cafe spends thousands of dollars on this set of tubes to alter mineral composition and make your espresso taste better. And no, you don't have to have one of these to make amazing espresso at home. So for this experiment, I'm going to be using the same coffee for each one, a Costa Rican medium roast. I'm going to go for 18 grams in and 30 grams out, which is my preferred recipe for a shot that I'm going to drink without milk. So let's start with tap water. Tap water is something that's going to vary wildly depending on where you live. When I went to Italy for the first time, I had this amazing mocha pot coffee, and I think a lot of the reason why it tasted so great was because of the water in Italy. In Japan, where I live now, the water is much softer and there are fewer minerals, so you don't get that lime scale buildup in your kettle, but the water also doesn't taste all that interesting. The hardness was around 75 to 80 parts per million, which I tested with a TDS or total dissolved solids meter. This will tell you the amount of mineral content in the water that you have, and it can be bought for around £10, but it won't tell you what kind of minerals they are. If you're curious about this, you can find out what the local mineral content of your water is by checking your local government websites. My local plant said that they had roughly 65 parts per million of mineral content, of which 4 parts per million was chlorine, which is used to disinfect the water. Now, the SCA recommends anywhere between 35 and 80 parts per million for the ideal espresso. When your espresso machine heats that water, it's going to gradually deposit any minerals in it in the inside of your boiler, and that will need cleaning every couple of months depending on how hard your water is. Some people use distilled water as it has 0 minerals and won't deposit anything on the inside of your boiler, but it can also be corrosive, so I don't recommend that. We'll talk more about it later in the video. Here's my taste test result. I can definitely taste the pecan flavor that I was roasting to emphasize, but it's got this sharpness and aftertaste to it that makes me feel like I'm missing a better flavor with this basic water. Yeah, basic. As a simple step up, I'm going to do the same thing with filtered water. I use a simple Clean Sui 13+2 water filter, which removes some of those overly harsh chemicals that are used in water treatment. These chemicals can react strongly with elements in coffee. Interestingly, the water hardness didn't change all that much when using a filter. It went down by about 4 parts per million, which coincidentally is around the same amount my local water treatment plant said they use of chlorine in the water as a disinfectant. It's like the flavor is rounder and more pleasant. It's definitely better, but subtly so. It's like the same coffee, but a lot of the flaws are gone. There might be different filters available to you where you live. I was recommended Zero Water, which I've heard does a very good job of removing minerals, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. But in any case, I almost always use filtered water for anything that I eat or drink because I notice the chemically aftertaste, especially in lighter roast coffees. If you change nothing else from watching this video, I hope that you'll change to using filtered water instead of tap water. Before I jump into bottled water, I'd like to mention those water softening packets that go into your reservoir, like the Best Water Technology one that I got with my Sylvia Pro X. I used it for a little while, but since the water in Japan is already pretty soft, I didn't notice all that much of a difference. But these might be great for you if you live in an area with particularly hard water and you don't want to spend a ton of money on other solutions. Next up, bottled water. Bottled water can be a good solution if you live in a country with odd chemicals in the water and you don't have all that many options for filtering solutions. I tested a few here: Ilohas, which is Coca-Cola's brand here in Japan, Crystal Geyser, Evian, and then this one called Contrex. The first step of my test was water hardness, and immediately I don't recommend Contrex, as this one had nearly 900 parts per million of water mineral content. Oh god, that's horrible. This is around 10 times higher than what SCA recommends for putting in your espresso machine, so I reckon it's probably going to clog up your machine with limescale and mineral deposits a lot faster than other solutions. It's like all of the wrong flavors are being emphasized here. I'm not tasting any of the things that I want to taste. I'm just tasting kind of generic coffee, but with this sort of almost metallic taste to it. So for the others, Evian had the highest water hardness at around 193, and then Crystal Geyser and Ilohas came in at 35 and 54 respectively, which is well within the range for an espresso. The taste was quite similar from both of them. It was hard to tell the difference between the two, but both were definitely better than tap water and had a lot more interesting subtle flavors coming through. So I'm not planning on buying bottled water for my everyday espresso. I just think it's a bit too wasteful in terms of plastic. But if that's the best and most consistent water you can get, it might be a good option for you. Now for the exciting advanced stuff, remineralizing solutions. To use any of the coffee water solutions, you're going to need to have distilled water, which has 0 parts per million, no minerals in it whatsoever. Like I said before, don't drink distilled water by itself or use it for coffee. It's going to taste flat and boring, and water without minerals can actually be bad for you. The first solution I'm going to use is third wave water. If you want to get perfect water for coffee without too much hassle, this is the solution I would go for. And I'll leave a link in the description below that you can use to try it for yourself and also to support this channel. So all you have to do to make this work is get 1 sachet and dissolve it in 2 liters of water, and we're ready. Oh wow, that is so much better. It's like all the flavors I was trying to pull out with the roast are accented properly with this water, and the sweetness and boldness of this flavor is turned up to 11. I know I have a pretty refined palate for coffee because I've been doing this for a long time, but honestly, I feel like anyone could taste the difference between these two coffees. It's like the difference between apple juice and orange juice. It's massive. Oh my god, that's so much better. Now, if you really want to custom your water, you can use Lotus water. This is a set of mineral droppers that you can use in any combination in distilled water. The amount of minerals per drop is controlled, and there are recipes on their website to tell you which ratio of minerals to add for different flavor profiles. Here's the recipe that I'm going to use for this experiment. It comes from their website and it's called the first cup. It's 2 drops of calcium chloride, 1 drop of magnesium chloride, and 3 drops of potassium bicarbonate. Kind of feel like I should be wearing a lab coat. This espresso tastes really great. When I first started experimenting with it, I was expecting it to taste more like the third wave water solution, but it tastes completely different. I tried different recipes, including more calcium chloride and less potassium bicarbonate, and I got some really good advice from Nick at Lotus Coffee Products on what each of these minerals do. Magnesium chloride tends to taste bitter and strong in high concentrations. Especially for darker roasts, this is going to bring out the boldness in your coffee, but don't go crazy. It's kind of like salt. You don't want to add too much or it's going to overpower the flavor. I like the first cup recipe using 1 drop, but if you're using darker roast, you can go for 2 or 3 depending on how you like it. Calcium chloride is interesting because it adds sweetness and a creamy mouthfeel and texture. I recommend limiting how much calcium chloride you add to around 3 or 4 drops absolute maximum. Potassium bicarbonate is an interesting one because it makes the water more alkaline, which is good for rounding out highly acidic light roast coffee. I'm going with 3 drops for this one, but you can reduce this if you're using a darker roast. What's really exciting about solutions like Lotus water is that you can really experiment and learn exactly what it takes to make amazing coffee at home. It's not for everyone, and I suspect that a lot of you would prefer something like third wave water, which guarantees you top quality water content without having to rehash your painful childhood memories of barely passing GCSE chemistry class. It was like the difference between cheap roasted coffee and expensive specialty coffee, and for me, that alone is worth the small time investment and price. I want to say a big thank you to Third Wave Water and Lotus Coffee Products for sending me their solutions to use for this video. Now, this video isn't sponsored by either of them, but I do appreciate getting products to review so that I can make videos like this. So my overall assessment is this. If you don't want to put too much effort into the water that you use for coffee, but you do want good water that isn't going to ruin your nice expensive coffee beans, you should at least be using a filter. If you're serious about getting the best espresso at home, water solutions are a little bit easier than they seem at first, and they make such a huge difference to your espresso. After all that, I'd love to know what kind of water you use in your coffee every day, and if you noticed a big difference like I did. Is playing around with water for coffee too hipster, or is this something that everyone could benefit from and notice the difference in flavor? You can check out my other videos in this series like dialing in light roast espressos and pulling out specific flavors by clicking on this playlist right here. And I hope you'll subscribe if you want to find out more about espresso and latte art from me in the future. Thank you so much for watching, you wonderfully overcaffeinated people, and I will see you on the next one.